Well, hello everyone. I'm Justin Bruner, Bridge Asset Management Section Chief and Asset Management Engineer for PennDOT, as well as the Vice Chair of the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management. I'd like to welcome you to the 74th webinar in the Transportation Asset Management webinar series, sponsored by FHWA and AASHTO. Today's webinar will feature speakers from Connecticut, Washington, and Virginia DOTs, exploring effective lifecycle planning and sharing their advanced lifecycle planning practices that have demonstrated measurable results. AASHTO has presented webinars in this series every 2 months, going back to 2012 on a variety of topics in asset management. For more information on this webinar series, visit tam-portal.com. That's TAM, T-A-M portal.com. From there, click Events in the main menu to register for any webinar. You'll also find archives of previous webinars, as well as links to slides and video from today's webinar. This is also the home of AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management. For information on the subcommittee, visit tam-portal.com. Click on Subcommittee on Asset Management under the Community menu. If you have any suggestions on future webinar topics or have questions for the presenters during today's webinar, please submit your comments or questions using the webinar's chat feature. We'll answer any questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We invite participants to unmute and share their views during the group discussion session at the end of the webinar. Until then, please keep your audio connected, but muted. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Tasha Clemens, Senior Transportation Specialist at the Federal Highway Administration, to give a brief FHWA welcome and introduction. Tasha?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone that's joining us today. I am Tasha Clemens, and I represent the Transportation Asset Performance Team in the Office of Infrastructure here at Federal Highway Administration. Federal Highways, in cooperation with the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management, is very pleased to sponsor this webinar series. It's a great way to bring people together around a series of important topics and to connect with the asset management community. Today's webinar will highlight best practices in lifecycle planning, and we have some fantastic speakers lined up for you today, and we can't wait to share their expertise with you as well. With this webinar, I am so excited to say that we have reached the 74th webinar in our series, and FHWA's Transportation Asset Performance Team is committed to increasing knowledge and capabilities at transportation agencies across the U.S. I do, however, encourage you to visit us online for more information and to gain access to available resources. Hopefully, you should be able to see the address for you to connect on your screen. And finally, I just want to say thank you for your participation. Hopefully, you will enjoy today's presentations. And now I would like to turn it over to Hayana Park of Spy Pond Partners to give an overview of today's webinar, to review today's agenda, and to introduce our speakers. Hayana?
Thanks, Tasha. I'm Kiana Park with Spy Pond Partners. The purpose of this webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are: learn about how DOTs can shift from an age-based state of good repair metric to a component condition-based state of good repair, highlighting the need for resilience in transportation planning and the corresponding adaptive design criteria for at-risk infrastructure, feature DOT plans to develop risk registers to manage assets in climate vulnerable areas, and of course, again, share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. I will introduce our speakers before each presentation, but in brief, they are Miguel Simon with the Connecticut DOT, who will talk about component condition-based traffic signals asset management program. Matt Versdahl with the Washington State DOT, and he'll talk about life cycle planning for pavement and bridge assets at the Washington State DOT. And Maria Mutuc from Virginia DOT, who will talk about their resilient transportation systems. Time permitting, we'll have an open group discussion at the end. Just another reminder, please submit your comments or questions using the Zoom's chat feature anytime during the webinar. We'll make sure to cover them at the end of the webinar. And as has been mentioned, the slides and video will be available after today's webinar. And Connor has put the link to the slides already in the chat. And if you came in and don't see it, just ask for it again and he'll put it up again. All right, let's move to our first speaker, Miguel Simon. Miguel works as a transportation engineer for the state of Connecticut Department of Transportation. Miguel was with the department's traffic electrical unit for a decade, where he has honed his skills in traffic engineering. For the past 3 years, he's contributed his expertise to the asset management group. With a wealth of knowledge in electrical engineering concept and traffic engineering, Miguel is committed to enhancing transportation systems and infrastructure. Miguel.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Miguel Simon from the Asset Management Group at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Today, I'll be presenting an overview of CTDOT's Traffic Signals Asset Management Program and how our approach to managing our signal infrastructure has matured over time. Here's a quick look at what we'll cover. I'll begin with a brief overview of the CTDOT Transportation Asset Management Program, followed by a look at the history of our traffic signal assets. We'll compare age-based approach to condition-based, examine our signal components, and introduce the traffic signal database dashboard. We'll finish up with our next steps and lessons learned. Traffic signals are one of the 11 assets in CTDOT's most recent TAM. To support that amount of assets, CTDOT has a team of 6 supporting our highway and public trans asset management programs. This group is part of our project administration unit in the Bureau of Engineering and Construction. The team includes 3 highway asset liaisons who work with the rest of the department to ensure consistency between assets and manage asset management reporting. Each asset has a designated asset steward. This role is held by someone at or above the supervising engineer level and is responsible for initiating state of good repair projects for that asset. Asset management is only one of many components of the steward's role, and we've found that designating an asset steward and liaison helps keep asset management at the forefront of project selection decisions. Traffic signals is one of the assets that I serve for as liaison for, and the signals asset steward is a supervising engineer in the traffic signals unit. The image on the right of this slide is of our fact sheets, which many of you have seen before. They have a communication tool. They are a communication tool that we prepare annually for all of our assets. The TAM program helps us manage infrastructure across its life cycle. For traffic signals, this means using data to guide maintenance, replacement, and funding strategies. With over 2,700 signals statewide, effective asset management ensures system reliability and safety. Traffic signals were included in CTDOT's first TAM in 2018. At that time, our state of good repair was defined by the state of the mast arm and span pole structures for a signal. While useful, this method has limitations. It's not necessarily representative of actual structural condition and did not reflect the condition of the other signal components. Last year, we were able to make the switch to condition-based state of good repair for traffic signals. Because of the early inclusion of signals in our TAM program, we have 7 years of the network state of good repair history. The increase in state of fair and poor signals over time reflects the age of the structures. many of which are constructed in the 90s, were aging out of a state of good repair based on our initial state of good repair definitions. Why shift to component-based approach? Age alone doesn't fully represent asset condition. Two signals installed in the same year can perform very differently depending on usage, environment, and how their individual components have aged. This chart shows the distribution of signal locations by the decade they were installed or replaced. A large portion of CTDOT's signal network were installed or replaced in the 90s. So many were aging into poor condition. But considering each component and inspecting our actual assets, we gained a more accurate understanding of the network's condition. This lets us plan with greater precision, ensuring that investment decisions and project prioritization are based on actual need, not just calendar age. The change to component condition-based state of good repair occurred alongside other enhancements to the traffic signals program, such as maintenance staff moving from a paper-based service to an electronic one, and the creation of a geospatial signals dashboard. With this approach, we hope that the component condition data can give us greater lifecycle information so that we can implement targeted preservation strategies that extend the useful life of the components and optimize funding for our signal network. The original state of good repair classified signals by age. Any signals structure 15 years old or newer was considered good. 16 years to 25 years old was considered fair, and 26 years or older was considered poor. The system was straightforward, but was not perfectly correlated with actual structural condition and didn't account for component level deterioration or component upgrades such as vehicle detection or cabinet. In 2024, we transitioned to component condition-based state of good repair. We now evaluate the signal using 4 components. This approach gives us a more accurate picture of our signal's network condition. Last year, we compared both approaches to the same data set of 2,795 CTDOT-owned traffic signal locations. The component condition-based method resulted in a significantly higher state of good repair than the age-based method did. Age-based had a 54% good or fair signals, and component condition rated had 83% good or fair signals. This is primarily due to the structures, which when inspected were found to be in a better condition than we had anticipated based on their age. The 4 components we assessed are structures like mast arms and span poles, signal cabinets, which include controllers and conflict monitors, vehicle detection systems, which include inductive loops and video detection, and communication systems. Each plays a unique role, and failure to any component can impact signal performance. Different components age and fail at different rates. By evaluating each independently, we can identify a more accurate condition of our signal network. Each of the 4 components of our traffic signal is given a good, fair, or poor rating. There are 81 different possible combinations of ratings. We arrive at a state of good repair for each signal with either a good, fair, or poor rating based on a decision matrix. This snapshot is not comprehensive of the entire matrix, but I want to note something not shown in this portion of the matrix. If the structure is poor, the overall state of good repair is automatically rated poor. The interactive traffic signal dashboard, which was created by a collaboration of the signals unit and GIS specialists at UConn, has a tab for state of good repair and links the geospatial information of our traffic signal network with the condition ratings. It allows us to view overall asset state of good repair, as well as the state of the various components. You can see many of our structures are good and many communication components are poor. It also displays traffic signal install dates. This database serves many other functions for our signals team, including signal timing and maintenance work orders. Now that we have our initial database, we need to make sure that the data is current. The signals will be inspected on cycle, and the database will be updated as capital projects are completed or maintenance work is performed on the signals. We hope to use the data to identify trends in each component's life cycle. This will allow us to further refine the projections we create for our TAM documentation. I'd like to end this presentation with some key takeaways. We found that a significant portion of structures we assumed were poor were actually in a state of good repair despite their age. We had an established traffic signal asset management program before we had the data and technology ready for the traffic signal database. It was easier to change to the new component condition-based state of good repair to the existing program instead of starting from scratch. The traffic signals unit was already familiar with the principles of asset management and the TAM reporting requirements, which made for a smoother transition from age-based to component condition-based state of good repair. While we think the decision matrix for the overall signal state of good repair is accurate, the complexity of the matrix has been limiting for some of our initial attempts to incorporate component life cycles into our projections. It makes any calculation more complex than Excel can handle. We may have still chosen the decision matrix method if we had known this in advance, but the ease of projections wasn't something that was considered during the inventory and condition development process. That concludes the presentation. If you'd like to connect or learn more, feel free to reach out via email or phone. You can also explore the CTDOT Asset Management Group's webpage for additional information and updates. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Miguel. We'll now hear from our next speaker, Matt Versdahl. Matt is the statewide asset manager for Washington State DOT. He earned his doctorate from the University of South Florida, and his research focused on developing machine learning applications for pavement asset management. Other areas of interest include applied research in digital twins, Internet of Things, generative AI, quantum computing, quality management, and supply chain and logistics. Matt, over to you.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. And great. Can you see my screen?
Yes, in fact.
Okay, great. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'll provide an overview of how we do lifecycle planning at WashDOT, specifically for pavement and bridge assets, but also dive a little bit into some of the work that we've done with integrating risk and resilience into this process. And then also talk a little bit about assets in climate vulnerable areas. Now, at WashDOT, lifecycle planning is really a good strategy to use for a number of reasons, which I'll get into. But for us, it's this consideration of costs and activities that go all the way from the construction to the end of its life cycle. And this method's used in, I've been doing this for a number of years. In manufacturing, it's called the total cost of ownership. And really the idea is you're not just looking at initial costs, but really trying to figure out what the costs are over its entire life cycle and all the activities that go into it, and really using it to make good decisions and comparing alternatives. And so we use it to minimize our long-term costs, but maintaining performance. So really it's a balancing act, if you will, of the right investments and the right activities to be able to maintain performance and extend the life of the assets. And for us, it helps to prioritize those investments and determine different strategies. And so Washington, like many other states, has a very diverse geographical landscape and climate. You have coastal regions. In fact, even on the coastal regions, you have different climates. Some are mountainous areas and some are not. And then you have mountains. Even our most populated city, Seattle, is right near a large body of water known as the Puget Sound. And then on the east side of the state, which separates the east and the west, is the Cascade Mountain Range. You have a very different climate. So all of those things can be taken into consideration for life cycle planning, and specifically what type of treatments and materials used to do construction. So when it comes to life cycle planning, we look at things like the initial construction costs, what routine maintenance is involved in the cost of doing that, when and what type of rehabilitation will be done, operational costs, and then end of life costs. And we have some systems that we use to do this, and our pavement management system, which has actually been around for a long time, allows us to use different scenarios and historical data and be able to model that and see kind of what, based on the data, what things have worked in the past and what things have we done. And, looking ahead in the future, we can use that data to model. And on the bridge side, we have our Bridge Engineering Information System, known as BEAST. Again, can be used for different modeling for deterioration, maintenance, treatment, and all the similar to what we do on the pavement side. And so, on the pavement side, for example, we use flexible and rigid pavement. So rigid pavement or the concrete, and then on the flexible pavement, your chip seal and asphalt. And again, because we have a pretty geographically diverse state, we can use that type of information to determine where, and also traffic volumes as well. We can use that type of information to determine what the best solution is. And so our life cycle cost analysis compares really the long-term strategies. And we use the equivalent uniform annual cost, which allows us to compare things from today's perspective in terms of cost, looking ahead into the future and really trying to see what's the long-term implications of deciding on a strategy. And, for an example, it supports decisions like choosing a pavement type. So really, it's an analysis of alternatives. And that's one tool that is within our pavement management system. And here's just as an example of at a project level of a tool that we have that's actually available on our website. And these are all made up numbers. I just put numbers in there to kind of for illustration purposes. But it really helps us look at things like initial costs, whether there's some acquisition costs, and then the design and the construction, and then looking at kind of the next phase of operations and other annual costs, whatever that may be. And then getting into later in the life cycle where you have rehabilitation and salvage value, really trying to understand what's the best investment that we can make. And in terms of, thinking about in the future, we'll have to do more maintenance and what things we can do to extend the life of the assets. Now, with this tool, you can You can sort of model how many years you're looking for the lifespan to be, starting with your base year, and then the discount rate, which is what allows you to see the costs in kind of today's perspective. And then normally we use 4%, but again, this is just for illustration here. And so the tool helps you look at present value as well as the equivalent uniform annual cost, EUAC, which helps to see in the long term and what the operational cost to keep it functional. And then this tool kind of helps you rank things, you know, your different alternatives. So whatever that may be, you can add more alternatives too. And then, you know, just visually, you can see from the example here where, you know, the divergence goes, and after several years, you know, one alternative shows that it's better than the other. And this was just a 10-year sample, for example, but, and then this is another example of some of the treatment strategies and for pavement that we have and things that we consider when looking at the life cycle. So as I mentioned, you know, some of these strategies will help us extend the life of the asset. So, you know, preventing us from having to go to replacement right away. You know, in some cases, we will apply different maintenance treatments, and then looking at the total cost and then what the cost should be here with EUAC. And then you can see that it's different for concrete and chip seal and asphalt. Now, I mean, the takeaway from all of this is really looking at all of the different variables and all of the different data and factors that go into managing these assets. So it's not just that initial cost. And so, you know, for Washington, we really look at which investment would be the best kind of from a long-term perspective. And then, you know, it helps us to make decisions on things like, you know, the long life pavements, you know, how do we keep them functional? And then things like we've done chip seal conversions, you know, like I said, on the east side of the state, we have lower annual average daily traffic. So we can do things like chip seal conversions and, you know, versus asphalt resurfacing, which chip seal conversions are a lot more cost effective. And the previous chart kind of showed how we've done that. And then, you know, really another thing to consider in this is, you know, at least in Washington, we have budget constraints. So, you know, normally you would be able to do kind of the expected activities, but in situations where you're budget constrained, you really have to look for solutions and alternatives and see what can be done to preserve the life of the asset. And here in this case, we call it strategic maintenance. So that might be preventative activities and really trying to find the right treatment and be proactive, doing it at the right time. Not too early, because then you lose some of that remaining life, but not too late either, because as time goes on, it deteriorates faster. So here's a summary from our 2022 TAMP of how this program and how these efforts have really kind of shaken out. You can see there's been an actual cost savings based on that effort here. So, you know, very, very intentional and strategic activities that allow you to realize some cost savings. And I'll mention this too, on the bridge side, over the last few years, and I don't have time to really get into all the details, but we have sort of adopted a more quantitative analysis for bridge with our asset management. So more to come on that in our TAMP forthcoming. But one reason I bring this up is because it it really shows you that this is kind of an evolution when you look at the life cycle costs. You can't just do kind of what you've always done, but really looking at different options is really critical in this type of analysis. And same thing with bridge. We have various strategies that we look at that, you know, will extend the life of the asset, what the costs are, and you know how we use that. So now I want to also talk about risk management and how we've applied that. And we look at it from 3 different perspectives at WashDOT. First is the enterprise level, which has to do with, you know, achieving our strategic plan goals, and asset management happens to fall under our resilience strategic plan goals. So they're very closely connected. And then, you know, you get more into the asset level here, but what we do, what we've done is how we've ranked and created treatment plans, and really the risk register method. But these help to optimize the strategy because you're assigning the risk to a risk owner, you're identifying the root cause, you are determining a treatment plan, and you're actually documenting it, and then it gives that opportunity to do an analysis on the risks. And those things can be considered in your planning. And we've done this sort of as a workshop style approach where we bring all the subject matter experts together and talk about the risks, and then go and, you know, have the subject matter experts, you know, work on it for, you know, whatever period of time in between, and then coming back together and refining it. And an example of that from the TAMP is right here shown on the screen, where pavement projects not programmed at the right time may increase life cycle costs. So we look at the current strategy and then what the treatment plan is, and then really identifying what the impact would be if this risk is triggered. And here's just another example of, on the pavement side, resurfacing, same thing, identifying the risk, and then what the implications for that would be. Now, we do also have some more kind of qualitative risk assessments, and this is also on the project side. But this is an example of where a risk was identified, and then the subject matter experts sort of rank it in terms of, you know, is it a low probability? What's the impact? And, you know, anything that's low probability, low impact, you know, may not necessarily be prioritized. But then if you have something that is high impact and high probability of occurring, and that is something that can be prioritized in your planning. So some of the things on the bridge side that we have prioritized, you know, in terms of risk, scour mitigation, it's one thing that we pay attention to, and seismic retrofits. You know, in Washington, we have seismic activity, so that is something that we definitely need to consider in terms of vulnerability. We've applied preventative maintenance. Painting has been a tool that we've used to preserve the life of a bridge asset. And then doing things like for deck repair, instead of replacing the entire deck, you may do a modified concrete overlay. And then, you know, of course, we have to consider things like, when do we rehab versus replace? You know, if it's beyond a certain point, then replacement may need to occur. And I also want to just share some of the tools that we have at our disposal. Now, these tools like this climate impact and vulnerability assessment wasn't necessarily created for this, or you know, but it is a tool that we have available to us as an agency. And you know, it's site specific, and you know, the vulnerability will look at, you know, sea level rise, for example. We have ferry terminals in Washington, and that's also could impact highways along the coast, precipitation, temperature, fire, and, of course, seismic. We also have, another plan that's underway right now, currently, is our Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan. And those will be, again, some site-specific analyses that will look at, some assets that could be at risk. We've also, currently, we're underway with a terminals vulnerability assessment, which does look at things like sea level rise. We have a coastal highway vulnerability assessment underway, and even an entire corridor, our I-5, Interstate 5 corridor, also has a assessment that's underway. So while those may not specifically be created for the asset management plan, they are tools that we can use in helping to plan and manage the assets. So, we use this kind of model of criticality and impact. And here's kind of how we define the criticality. Nice that it's color coded, because, obviously anything that gets closer to critical, it's more in the red category there. And then we also define here what failure means and impact. And then this thing sort of brings everything together. So you bring the criticality and impact together, and then you sort of get an overall ranking. All right, and then again, not necessarily something that was created for this type of activity, but just things that our agency does. Our maintenance division does, they call it an maintenance accountability process, which is essentially they sample, the work in these activity areas, and then, based on the funding that they receive, they think they can achieve this level. This is what we define from the maintenance perspective as state of good repair, and then this is what we're actually delivered on. So the takeaway is you're constantly evaluating. It's useful for asset management because we can look at these, regular evaluations. And so, in closing, the key takeaways is that we're trying to achieve smart, cost-effective asset management. So I look at it as, being creative, trying to find every tool that you can use to inform your decision-making. And we use, all kinds of data models and field insights. So whatever can help us inform that. And really the result is longer life and lower cost for your transportation assets. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Hannah.
All right. Thank you, Matt. All right, so our final presentation is from Maria Mutuc. Maria is a registered professional engineer in Virginia and has over 25 years of environmental and water resources engineering experience. As VDOT's resilience manager, she was instrumental in the development of the VDOT Resilience Plan, released in December 2022, and is now focused on facilitating its implementation. Prior to joining VDOT in 2021, she worked for consulting and transportation design firms with a focus on environmental engineering, transportation, stormwater management, erosion and sediment control, and drainage design. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm now gonna share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I am Maria Mutuc, and I am the Resilience Program Manager for VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation. I would like to thank everyone for, thank you for the invitation to speak about how VDOT is incorporating resilience into its current business practice to achieve a resilient transportation system. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So as we all have observed in the recent years, we have been experiencing increasing natural hazards and threats such as extreme weather, which has translated to more frequent and sometimes severe flooding, which have led to increased asset deterioration and asset failure. It has also presented challenges to our operational maintenance and emergency management operations. And so VDOT recognized the need to identify cost-effective solutions to address this problem. VDOT was really not alone in the recognition of this challenge, and because we do have a large coastal community that has been and being affected by these natural threats. And so the state, regional, and local entities have been working on resilience planning efforts and have really been coordinating with VDOT and have been asking us, quite frankly, how the agency is planning on addressing these challenges. And so at that point, VDOT really recognized that we needed a plan to inform and align with state, regional, and local planning efforts and make sure, one, that we're not duplicating the efforts, and two, that we are, as much as possible to the large extent, try to make our efforts more consistent with each other. And so resilience has also been incorporated in some shape or form in some of our state executive orders, transportation planning, and legislation. And one of the legislation includes a stipulation that the Commissioner of Highways shall ensure resiliency is incorporated in the design standards for new construction projects. So there's also part of legislation that stipulates that as part of our 6-year improvement plan, we should be identifying whether a project has been designed to be or the project has committed the design will be resilient. So those were really the drivers for us to develop a resilience plan to provide a framework for incorporating resilience in our transportation system. But really, to get everybody on the same page, we really had to define transportation resilience, right? What does it mean for VDOT as an agency? There are a lot of different definitions of resilience, and we want to make sure that we all are speaking the same language. And so this is the definition of transportation resilience for VDOT. And this was largely taken from the FHWA definition with some additions. And really, it's a very lengthy definition, so I'll not read it. But the keywords here are anticipate, prepare for, respond to, or recover from. So those were really the goals for this resilience plan. Again, our resilience plan was published in December of 2022. And our plan was really intended to help serve as the framework for how we navigate through incorporating resilience into our existing business practices. We weren't intending to create a whole new different approach, but instead we really just are trying to enhance our current business practices to be able to accommodate or enhance resilience of our assets. And so because the effort was all encompassing, it was really all hands on deck. And this just shows you the roles and the flow of approvals of recommendations. The resilience program resides in the Office of Transportation Sustainability under the Environmental Division, and we are charged to implement the plan and coordinate resilience efforts for VDOT. We've established a multi-divisional resilience steering committee, and these really are the people that we call our working group, and they are tasked to develop recommendations, guidance documents, policy decisions, that would be then sent to our leadership, which is comprised of the division administrators and district engineers for approval, and then further elevated to our executive leadership, which is comprised of our chiefs and a deputy commissioner and our commissioner. And in some occasions, we do need to seek the approval of our Secretary of Transportation and our Commonwealth Transportation Board for some policy decisions, if there are any policies that we are proposing to alter or add. And we are also supported by our Transportation Research Council that helps us with a lot of the research. Again, we are dealing with a lot of uncertainties, and it's a very it's a new territory for us, and so there are a lot of unknowns. And we have been fortunate to have the VTRC to help us with some of the researches related to resilience and changing conditions. So the resilience plan has 6 objectives and strategies associated with each objective. And I think for today, for this presentation, really, we are going to be honing in on 3, 4, and 5, which I think is really the important thing that we are currently focusing on right now as an agency. And we have been developing tools for 3, 4, and 5. And so 3 is identify at-risk infrastructure. We have been building, number 4 is resilience practices. We have been building a resilience toolbox comprised of different resilience practices, including design considerations and also maintenance practices. And then the number 5 is focused on developing a benefit cost analysis tool. So looking at the cost of resilience and comparing it to the benefits of adding resilience to your assets. So what are the traffic benefits to it? What are the user cost benefits to that? What is the replacement benefit to it? So just giving us an idea of the benefit cost of each of the resilience practice. So as I mentioned earlier, we really want to be able to integrate resilience into existing practices. So we did put together this sort of integration of resilience into our existing business practices. So it goes through how we're envisioning it to be part of our project planning process, how it's part of our project delivery process, how it is going to be envisioned to be part of our operations and maintenance practices. We also have resilience objectives incorporated in our 2024-2026 business plan. And those 2 objectives are, 1, to implement the resilience plan and its associated objectives and strategies. And the second one is to maintain and strengthen the resilience of our infrastructure. So again, as I've mentioned earlier, I think the 3 important things that we are currently focusing on are these 3 things. So, these 3 important tools that we are currently developing is really geared towards basically answering 3 questions that we have. So number 1, which of our assets are vulnerable and at risk? Number 2 question is, how do we address vulnerability? And then the third one is, which one of the proposed solutions or practices will be the most beneficial and give us the best return on our investment? So for this presentation, I really wanted to hone in on one of our identified resilience practice, which is adaptive design criteria. So the adaptive design criteria is one that incorporates forward-looking conditions intended to enhance resilience of assets and extend the life of the asset and decrease the maintenance cost. So in February of 2020, our Structures and Bridge division published a new chapter, Chapter 33, which includes enhanced design criteria for climate change and coastal storms. So considerations for climate change and coastal storms. So this chapter includes the use of corrosion-resistant materials to account for increase in salinity, the use of 20% increase in rainfall intensity when designing for deck drainage, and also the use of the 200-year flood as opposed to 100-year flood event to account for increased discharge when designing for scour and buoyancy calculation. For sea level rise, we are also increasing the mean high tide by 4 feet in tidal locations to account for future conditions, and also increasing the low chord elevation of at least 2 feet above the mean high tide. So we have been developing, so Chapter 33 has been published, is developed, is in full effect. We have been also developing similar new chapters for our hydraulics, pavement, and geotech design manuals. And again, the things that we're considering is on the slide. So for hydraulics, obviously the precipitation increase and projected IDF curves. For considerations for design of drainage and stormwater conveyance systems. For the materials division, we are also providing a new chapter for pavement design considerations, and also for slope and embankment design considerations for geotech assets. We are also drafting reference manuals for some practices that we have not traditionally included as part of our traditional process for designing roads. So some of it are the natural and nature-based solutions. So trying to give some guidance on the use of nature-based solutions to help alleviate some of the challenges, wave attenuation, for example, as it relates to sea level rise, and storm surge, and other things. There are also other physical enhancement that we have not traditionally explored that we are looking at exploring, and so we have been developing some reference manuals for that. So what I wanted to show you is a project where enhanced design criteria was used to enhance resilience of the asset and extend the life of the asset. This is the I-64 Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel Expansion Project. So HRBT connects Hampton, Virginia to Norfolk, Virginia. And the adaptive design criteria, just to introduce the project, this is a $3.9 billion dollar project, and it is it is the largest highway construction project in Virginia's history. And the project is in partnership with our region, and 92% of it is paid for with regional controlled funds and aims to ease congestion along a nearly 10-mile corridor on Interstate 64 through the addition of twin two-lane bored tunnels under the harbor from Hampton, Virginia to Norfolk, Virginia, and also the widening of 4-lane segments. So this is the scope of the project. It just gives you an idea of what the elements are. So there's the tunnel, there are the marine trestles, the standard bridges, and roadway works. So again, it's a pretty hefty project for us. So the adaptive design criteria that was applied and is being applied to this project. Started in 2020, and is expected to be done in the year 2026, 2027 timeframe. So the enhancement that is being done for the project is higher structures to accommodate for sea level rise. So in some areas, the structures are higher by 5 to 10 feet. And I think in this picture, you can clearly see the difference between the heights between the new one and the old bridge. And again, that is to accommodate for projected future sea level rise. Also, the floodgates and the tunnels were designed for the effects of storm surge. So there was an additional 5 feet that was added to those floodgates and the tunnels. And there is also the increased number of the scuppers or the deck drainage to account for, again, future increase in precipitation. So the other change that was done, and I think I've captured this, so the Chapter 33 does mandate or direct people to use corrosion-resistant materials and corrosion-free materials for consideration, for salinity consideration and increased salinity considerations in the future. And so the HRBT, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, did use these different materials that are outlined here. And they are expecting 100-year service life for this bridge with a combination of all the things that I have outlined. So not only are they using better materials, more resistant materials, they're also including and incorporating forward-looking conditions to assure that this bridge would last us longer and to extend that lifespan of the bridge more than the traditional or the normal bridge lifespan. And so I think the takeaway for us is that, if you do understand where your vulnerable infrastructures are, if you do understand some of the practices and resilience options that are there for you to utilize, and that you'll be able to make smaller investments while you're already building a project. Granted, I mean, this project is going to cost billions of dollars regardless of the resilience enhancements. But I guess that's the point, right? If you make additional incremental investment to your already existing project when you're planning it, then you will reap the benefits of a longer and extended lifespan for your assets. And the intention is for decreased maintenance and higher performance for that particular asset. And so to conclude, I just want to leave you with a video of the project. Connor, I don't know if you can share the video with the folks here.
The I-64 corridor is one of the most congested areas in all of Virginia, with backups often exceeding 6 miles during peak traffic hours. The Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion, the single largest transportation infrastructure project in Virginia's history, is being developed to improve traffic flow and support future growth.
All right, that concludes my presentation. Back to you, Hun.
Thank you, Maria. That was a very cool video. So what happens at the end points? Does it go back down to 2 lanes, or does it come into a existing 4 lane?
It's so that it becomes a 4-lane, so they did tie it in. So there's improvements to both the approaches and the trestle, so the south trestle and the north trestle, and so they're expanding that as part of the whole project. So.
All right, thank you, Maria. We appreciate all of our presenters taking the time to share their expertise and knowledge. If you have questions, please type them into the chat feature of the Zoom menu bar, or just unmute and ask. You can also raise your hand using the Zoom feature, and we can call on you as well. So let's get all of our presenters, and so Justin and Tasha too, to come on to the screen. Get your cameras back on, and I'd like to start with kind of a general question that I'm opening to all of you all, is, it seems to me that, traditionally when we've talked about life cycle planning and management, that we're really looking at long-term cost efficiencies. You're trying to reduce costs through life cycle planning. But yet now a lot of what we see as important, and I'm sure you all are going to be dealing with in your upcoming TAMPs, is this this need for resilience building. And they seem, they're clearly, I mean, many of you have mentioned it. It seems like that you're trying to achieve both things, but there's, I think, some tension between resilience building and lowering cost. And so just your thoughts on what you're seeing and how you do that balancing, and what you would like to see more of in the future. Who wants to go first? I'm going to turn to Justin, who I know loves this topic. Let's start with you.
Okay. So I think PennDOT looks at this as really, we're looking at our investment dollars currently as they go out to bid. We're trying to change, let me think of a better way to say that. So when we start talk about resiliency in general, right? Really what that means for us is, roadway grade, higher or larger hydraulic openings, looking at how our infrastructure will deal with what we see in Pennsylvania as extreme weather events, right? And for us, it's mainly flooding. So how do we address that? And that's through, again, those bigger openings, bigger deck drains, higher roadway elevation. So to achieve that cost effectively, really that means, unfortunately, it's an incremental march towards fixing that, because we're not going to go out and replace miles and miles of highway, or elevate miles of highway, or tear down bridges just because they may not have the required hydraulic opening. We have to amend our existing processes so that the selections that we're making do in fact achieve both goals, which is trying to achieve a lowest life cycle investment strategy while also achieving some level of resiliency. And that's really a tough balance to make, because it does in fact add costs to that. But we've built those costs into our models, so we know what we're getting into. It's just, unfortunately, it degrades our overall long-term performance slightly, because we are in fact, it's a trade-off. I shouldn't say it degrades. It's a trade-off between having better resiliency and better long-term asset performance.
Thanks, Justin. Any others?
Yeah, I think cost is always an issue, right? And funding is always the challenge, right? So I think if you're in an ideal world, it's easy to fix all of the challenges, but we are limited by funding. And so I think what we're trying to do is, again, identify and score our vulnerable infrastructure so we know where to focus our attention to, given the limited funding. And then couple that again with our resilience practices. I say this all the time. I don't think we can design our way out of it, unfortunately, right? Because of the limitations in the funding. And so for VDOT, we have strategically crafted our resilience practices, so that includes construction and design, and asset maintenance, but it also includes some traffic operational processes and practices. So for example, like detour planning and just flood forecasting, recognizing and understanding that if it's flooding, the best way maybe is to just make sure that we warn people in advance of the flooding, or we minimize the disruption to traveling public if we can recover from that flooding event more quicker. So I think it's a combination of those different things, because again, with the limitation of the funding, we fully recognize that. But the other thing that we always express, though, to to people, that adding, when you already have a project, adding that sort of like incremental cost, and that's why it's really important to have sort of a benefit cost analysis, right? So sometimes you'll be surprised that if you look at it from that incremental cost, just that small incremental cost will really get to you the benefit of that extended lifespan. And in the long run, you may be incurring the cost now, but in the long run, it may save you some of the asset maintenance costs and the traveling public user cost and replacement benefits, right? If you were to replace that because it were to flood several years, or we do have roads in Virginia that are constantly flooded every single time it rains, and so I think that is how we're sort of approaching it.
Matt, have you guys, when you showed your life cycle cost analysis tool, have you applied that tool using resilience building alternatives?
Yes, I mean, like I brought up the some of the studies that have been going on, and I mean that's one way that those studies have kind of informed that process. So like kind of like what everyone else was saying. I mean, it's a well, I'll say this: going into the resilience and improvement plan process, and we're fairly like in the early stages. Like we just went through the contracting process, and so one of the things we realized was like you can't, unfortunately, like you want to tackle everything and every resilience issue in every different type of vulnerability, but you really can't. So you kind of have to pick like which, I guess the word I'm looking for is prioritize. You have to prioritize which ones and which routes, and sometimes those are like your lifeline routes. And so as we go into this, I mean, I think it takes a lot of time. So you use it in your planning process, but then again, just like every other state, I mean, we're severely limited by funding, right? So you really can't. You have to prioritize what you want to accomplish. And as we get more data, and part of the reasons why we do these studies is so that we have the data. Like we can look at a vulnerable area and say, okay, these are the, we have data to say this is being impacted because of X, Y, and Z, whether it's flooding or wildfires or whatever the case is. So
yeah. Miguel, how about for you in terms of your traffic signal program? Are you integrating any resilience elements into the way you look, especially at life cycle planning?
Yes, traffic signals, definitely. We're using resilience planning just by going out and evaluating every signal that we currently maintain. One of the things we want to do is look at all those components and see what the state of good repair for each of those components may be. And that way we can prioritize, our investments so that we won't have to put a project ahead of another just because of the calendar day change, but also mapping out the future or where we're going to put our bucks and figure out if we should be planning in long term for a flooding event or some sort of climate change catastrophic event. And we had many of those in Connecticut. So just going out and realizing that data is your most important friend, getting all of those components evaluated and getting back kind of a historical view of how these assets for the traffic signals were affected. A lot of times by wind and flooding. We can definitely improve despite the budgets that, constraints that we may have where we're putting a lot of our dollars.
Thank you. Maria, there was a question from someone about whether your VDOT resilience toolbox is available to the public.
Not yet, but the only thing that is available and published right now is our, again, Chapter 33, Structures and Bridge Manual, considerations for climate change and coastal storms. But some of the other chapters are still in draft form for approval by our executive leadership, and so we're still waiting on those and our other guidance documents. But we'll definitely share with the group once it is available.
I know VDOT's very generous about sharing everything with the public, so that's great. We'll look forward to it. It will be available on the TAM portal in the future. Matt, I was curious, based on your bio, if what you're doing with machine learning and pavement management, and if you're applying that at Washington State.
So my research is still, I just completed my dissertation, and so I did develop, the research I did was intended to be for practitioner use. So that's forthcoming. Hopefully.
You have to wait for a future webinar to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I did try to do, and I'll keep this short, is I did try to use what we call low code or no code tools in using machine learning to make it more accessible to practitioners, as opposed to needing to know how to code in Python or something like that. But yeah, eventually, hopefully it'll be out there and people can find it useful.
Cool. Well, maybe this is a time to ask a question I ask more frequently these days is, so what do you all think is a application of AI in asset lifecycle management that we can hope to have in the future, and what that would do to how we practice asset management? Any thoughts?
I have one. I just walked through an exercise earlier this week trying to utilize try to utilize an AI tool to do something with all of our TAMPs. And what I found is that it's not very good. Like ChatGTP is not very good at doing math. It's actually kind of sad. So I don't have high hopes.
I've spent some time building my own GPTs, so yeah, I mean, I can talk about this for a long time. So if you're interested, reach out to me. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Justin. There's still a lot of work to be done in that area. But maybe even more simplified, like what I used my research, even just regression modeling, trying to make predictions with the data that we have. Maybe a good first pass at it.
For traffic signals,
Go ahead.
For traffic signals, I think that having AI would be helpful in the project selection phase. A number of times we take an evaluation of a signal, the history of it, and when it's time for those components to be upgraded. And most of it's being done by the engineers who run the program. But I can imagine some sort of software implementation, whereas we run 20 or probably upwards 50 different scenarios where we put projects in place that would actually determine the budget constraints, but not only that, determine what components we should be replacing with a particular project. So AI, I can see in the future replacing engineers, which is unfortunate, but a lot of the research and technology available is definitely beneficial for that piece of our job.
Maria?
Yeah, I think there's just been talks generally on using AI on how to again, I think Matt had alluded to this. You know, on how you use your data, right, in predictions. So maybe flood forecasting based on our historical data. There's also been talks about just using AI to help refine cost estimates for our benefit cost analysis as projects do come along. It's an easy way to type, you know, how much does it cost for this practice instead of like having to go through all the data one by one. If there's an AI technology that can just ask, you know, what is the average cost of installing a nature-based solution of this particular type, that would be beneficial. There are also some talks about using artificial intelligence for like traffic cameras in relation to flood detection as well. So, and verification and validation and ground truthing of some of the flood modeling capabilities that's already out there. So there's certainly a number of different AI talks that have been floated around there for resilience purposes.
Well, you know, one of the thoughts I have is that AI clearly benefits from its ability to just, you know, work with massive amounts of data that, and it can, you know, learn to have pattern recognition as long as you're feeding it and it understands the area. So I'm imagining that in the future that every transportation agency, whether you're a locality at state level, some national agencies are sharing how assets are behaving in micro, bigger, whatever, in different ways that it can process all of that to have a way to provide us as the users kind of range of asset behavior depending on different condition types, and that it's taking so much data that we can't even imagine it today, you know, but it will be able to do that, and it will give agencies a better handle on what models to use to help do the forecasting better, right? So anyways, well, I think that's a good place to wrap up and thank all of you. A big applause to all of you, and hope to see you guys in the future. We'll hear about Matt's machine learning on pavements at a future. We can follow up with him on his own GPT also. But our next webinar will be held on June 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic will be risk management plans in your TAMPs. We'll be providing more information on this as we get closer to the webinar. We hope you'll be able to join us. This kind of starts kicking off our look at trying to provide the resources agencies are going to need as they begin their TAMP, the 2026 TAMP building process. And additional webinars, as you know, will be continuing, scheduled every 2 months. Please send ideas for future webinars. And as a final reminder, for more information, please visit tam-portal.com. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.